Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Philosophical Weightlifting Podcast. I'm your host, Joshua Gibson, and I'm joined by Max Aita. Max, it's been too long.
Been a long time. Been
Yeah.
I've been seeing a lot of other guests on here, and I haven't seen myself on here, and I'm kind of wondering, really, is that it? Is that the way this ends? A couple
Yeah.
years of friendship, good 8 months of good quality friendship, and I guess 3 to 5, 7, 10 years of sort of mediocre acquaintancing that we've
Yeah.
done. And there it is, down the drain, just like that. Out. I'm out.
The hardest thing for me to admit, the most difficult thing for me to admit, it pains me. And every time I see it,
When
I
you came out of the
shudder.
closet, or,
No, it's that all of the episodes I record with you get the most downloads.
well, that the one where you finally admit your true interests, where they really lie. The old bear cave. Josh Gibson at musclebearpup.com. That email you haven't officially launched. No, I appreciate that. That's cool. It's good to know that I'm better than you, and I draw. No, it is good. I appreciate that. To piggyback on that and talk about myself a little bit more. The YouTube. I have a YouTube account under
Yeah.
my own name that I last posted on prior to this final run was I think I last posted on it probably like 2014 or something like that. So like zero engagement, nothing, and just started posting videos again. So I recorded a bunch of stuff, training, programming, opinion stuff, and just started putting it out and had some really good like responses right off the bat, which is cool. Because sometimes I think that people don't actually care about anything I'm going to say, which is probably true as well. But it's nice to know that people actually listen to these, and that's good.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, like whenever I scroll down consistently, like top five, it's three Max 8 episodes.
That's so
Like
funny.
top five all time. It's like Mike Israetel, Olivia Reeves,
Yeah,
Max 8.
yeah. It's always funny to me that anyone would want to listen to anything I have to say because it's all just garbage. But again, here we go. Let's do another podcast. Some Max Ada slop for those fans to pick up on.
You actually made a really good point. I think it's salient, which is, we talk about like, okay, we need to, an athlete struggles with this, we need to help them improve in that, and they're, whatever. It's like, okay, we're kind of stuck on this issue. And it's like, oh, it's not like our entire, career profession rides on our ability to do that well. And
Yeah,
sometimes you're getting this rut. Actually, I'm on the other side of that where I felt like I was really hitting this like coaching rut. But recently, I don't know what's going on, but everybody's like popping off for really massive PRs.
nice.
Yeah, like Leah's legs have always been like just abysmal, and she had like 4 kilo PR, and it actually looked good.
Wow.
Like moving in the right direction. The weightlifting movements are kind of starting to pick up. A lot of people who struggle with that have really started to like ratchet their strength levels up, and I'm sure you see it the way I do. If someone isn't making progress, it's like, yeah, the training's not good, and they need more. They need like a better stimulus. And they need the correct stimulus and the correct magnitude to drive a change, and to see that start to pick up, everybody starts to make progress. I think that's just like, okay, the process is good in general. And that's one thing we wanted to talk about. We have two athletes competing at USAPL Raw Nationals. Danny Myers Glenn in the 90 kilo class, and then Suzette Bradley, and is she 82.5?
Yeah.
Yeah, in the
Really, really
82 mark.
light though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have two people competing, and we've been kind of going back and forth a little bit about how we've been modifying their training to ensure that they're, I mean, honestly, very, very competitive. Danny's gonna look at placing top three, and then you said Suzette's got it slated like, pretty close to being able to set, pretty close. She'll be able to set an American record in the squat.
Yeah,
So
I think so.
I think we're looking at big performances, and we wanted to use that as kind of like a case study of what approach are we taking to ensure that happens, and not just by, the winds of fate would have it that somehow, they make it, but like, oh, that was kind of predicted. So start with Suzette. Where were you guys at where you're like, man, we're kind of in a training rut? And then how did you guys get out of that to the point where she just squatted, 2.5 kilos over the American record?
Yeah. Well, first off, thanks for letting me get a word in edgewise here. Good Lord. This whole podcast feels it's just the Josh Gibson hour. Um, how am I going to feed this megalomaniac ego I have? Uh, no, no. So, I mean, yeah, we're talking a little bit about the idea of like, what is the time frame for like how long you're going to try something before you give up on it, or, what is the, for me, it's also like a process of like, with her, she wasn't making a lot of progress, and that was largely programming wise. She was training hard, but I wasn't really looking to say, okay, what do we have to do to make you better? Like, what are you really missing? Where are things falling apart? And when we really focused on that, she came to me after the Olympia last year and was like, hey, we need to make some changes. This stuff's not working. And so, we looked at it and we're like, okay, like your squat is not progressing. And when we look at your training, it's like, it's just way too hard. So let's back off the sort of overall RPE and dial that back a lot and focus more on, skill development and like do some heavy singles on a regular basis, lower the reps per set in general. Same for deadlift. Like we're just trying too hard to move the needle. And ultimately, a lot of it was just like falling into that trap of thinking that you're going to steer the adaptation by forcing progression versus the other way around, which is like she just asked me, actually, it's funny, downstairs, I was just spotting her. She just asked me like, well, if I hit this weight I'm doing today, like, what are we going to do next week? Like, how much do we go up? And I was like, well, we let next week determine that. Like, we have an idea you're probably going to be stronger, but as your warm-ups progress, if you're looking like 2.5 kilos is all we're going to make this week, that's fine. If it's 7.5, we go up 7.5. But we have to let the adaptation dictate the overload. And that means you really have to pull back from this idea that like every week we're just going up in weight for whatever reason, just because arbitrarily we have to. The goal is to move the average weight up. We want that to move upward.
Yeah.
That would tell us we're getting stronger. But it can't be something we're forcing. So maybe next week is only a 1% overall increase in total, weight on the bar, but that's fine. That might just mean we went too much the first week, or that we're fatigued, overly fatigued from the last week, or that we haven't done enough stimulus. So that was the biggest thing, just like being really, aware of and disciplined with staying with that concept that the adaptation she makes is what dictates the weight on the bar. It could be that one week is, like last block, she hit a big PR squat and we went up in a very uneven way. Like it was the first week was probably like 147 and then like 152. Then the next week was like 160, right? And then the week after that was we hit 170. So it's like a small jump and then larger jumps. And ultimately it was only determined by how the warm-ups looked and how she was moving. But to get to the point of like, what do you do as far as like, how do you make changes? It's like just looking at what the athlete needs. And I think it kind of falls into a couple categories. And I'd be curious to see your opinion, but like, it's either like, you need new exercise, like there needs to be some other exercise being performed. And that's largely like a skill issue or like, some kind of muscular weakness. So it's like, you need to target things differently. The second would be that it's like the training load is just not properly dosed. It's too much, too little. It's too frequently, not frequently enough. In which case you have to modify the programming, but the exercises are correct. And then the third is that maybe you're just way off base with everything, and it's like, either they don't know how to do the skill properly, so you have to like reteach that, or you're just everything is off, like training load and exercise selection is wrong. Or psychological, there's like an issue where they just don't understand the skill, or there's a fear around it.
Yeah. No, I really like that. I think your point about um, kind of having changes in training predicated on performance, I think that's like, as a coach, you're like, yeah, you should kind of like feel the progress happening. You should kind of play that out. It's like, okay, week one is like, yeah, that was kind of ragged. And then week two, it feels a little bit better. Week three, okay. Week four, it's like, yeah, I'm like, I can feel that I've gotten better because of the training. Not like week
Yeah.
one is too, it's I think a shitty place you can get into as a writing programs. Week one's too heavy, but it's like the training's also not formulated correctly, and then week two, it's
Hmm.
just like everything's
Yeah.
downhill. It's just like
Yeah.
gets sloppier and sloppier, and you're trying to force. You're just like kind of hopeful, fingers crossed, waiting to force a progression, and it doesn't
Yeah.
get forced. And that's probably because the volume's too high. It's generally because I think when everything's too heavy, I don't know if it's like accumulated fatigue or what, but like the adaptation doesn't seem to take when you start in that kind of like sweet spot, like decent bar speed, kind of moderate to medium to high volumes, and then it's like right when people feel good and they move well. That week two progression tends to be pretty like stepwise.
Hmm.
But I've gotten into a place, and it's kind of funny you mentioned that with Suzette. I kind of felt that way with Danny going into, and I mentioned this to you, going into the Arnold. She squatted just like an atrocious 170 for one, super ragged. And I told her, I was like, I mean, we're going to be optimistic. It's like, that's all you can do. And she went into the Arnold and squatted 182.5. But the block after that, I was like, okay, we just need to back off really aggressively, prioritize movement, and give you time to adapt and build some
Hmm.
capacity. So he started this like stepwise, kind of just like adding volume in the form of reps per set, and just added reps and volume, kicked back, and then restarted the progression with intensity. And she ended up squatting 170 for seven, and it was like
Wow.
it was good. So we went from like pre Arnold 170 for like a really grindy one to doing it for a set of seven. She's gonna squat like 182.5 for four on Tuesday, so tomorrow. Um,
What do you think the biggest change was, like from the single to the seven?
I think what happened is she got in this place where we were spinning our wheels in mud, and like the faster we tried to spin or the more aggressively we tried
Hmm.
to spin, the deeper we just dug ourselves. So it like training got too heavy, and then there's like, well, how much do we back off? I mean, and I was going to ask you this too, like when you find yourself in, you have a macro cycle kind of laid out, and you say, okay, we're 20 weeks from the comp, we get 12 in, and it's like this is going all to hell. Like, what's your approach to trying to manage that or salvage it? With her, a lot of that was you. I think you need more volume, and because she's basically moved from like being a super heavy to being, yeah, relatively moderate
Hmm.
weight class. And it's like, okay, you probably can tolerate more training, you're not as strong, so let's build some of that capacity back, let's try and bump the volume up a bit. And I think that in like the exercise selection being more geared towards what she needed, which is just like more really deliberate tempo stuff, some spoto press to like work on bar path and stuff like that, and just really aggressively pulling back and saying, okay, we're just gonna, I don't care how slow this is or how light it is, we need to build back up. And doing that, it just started to create this momentum, and then eventually she was able to handle way more training volume. um, and then adding a third day of squatting but using the belt squat, I think just like pumped her legs up just enough, but didn't fatigue her like her back. So
Nice.
able to just like juice her legs up. She's going really heavy on it. um, and I think that's just helped get like more stimulus into her quads, which she really needed. So
Yeah. For me, what I find is what I realize is I have to like go back to this like baseline where it's like, okay, if we're having trouble, I would go back to like a baseline of like, let's do several weeks progressing, like several weeks with the same RPEs. So like it would be like your single is RPE 7 each week. And that would tell me right away, like week to week, if that number is going up or going down, right? Like what's potentially happening? Are we just getting more fatigued? So we add more volume in, and if that number starts to go down, she's just tired,
yeah,
right? If we remove some volume or leave the volume the same, and she starts doing it and doesn't see a strength response, like it doesn't start to move, the weight doesn't move up for the same RPE, then potentially she's just not, it's just not hard enough training, right? Where it's like it's enough to sort of maintain, and you're kind of just floating, but you're not tired, you're not getting worse each week, you're just kind of stuck there. So it's like maybe we start to ramp that up. I think there's a lot of value in having these sort of like KPIs in training, like singles, that give you a really good like handle on exactly where someone's at. And it doesn't have to necessarily be like just their max strength, but like if that number isn't the same, or if that number is not, you know, consistent, where it's like every week you just go hard on a bunch of volume, it doesn't help to sort of clarify exactly where your level is at, you know? Obviously, you could track every single set and all the RPEs and all that stuff and get a picture of it, but I think just having a single data point is good because you can say, hey, every week our single is moving up or down, or it's not changing, but we're increasing volume or decreasing or whatever's happening. We can kind of get an idea like what about's going on. But also, if you set that baseline, do like 3 or 4 weeks of like the same level of difficulty work, you'll get to a point where you can identify like, hey, what's potentially happening here? What do we need to make a change for? Generally speaking, it doesn't feel like it's that much of it needs that big a shift. You know, you get to that where it's like, okay, we might just, like you're saying, add a third day of belt squatting in,
Yeah.
or you know, maybe just dial back the back off sets. Don't make them so hard. Maybe every week you only progress the back off sets a little bit, even though you could go anywhere you want, whether you could add 5, 10 kilos, you maybe keep it the same and see what happens. And if you don't see a decrease in performance, you don't need to try to ratchet it up so aggressively. Yeah, that's kind of where I would go to. I would generally go there first before scrapping things and starting from a complete fresh slate or changing exercises dramatically.
Yeah. And when you were talking about that, one thing I was reminded with Danny, it's like we have, I have 5 years of training with her, and I know exactly what she did for the 5 years. So it's like a third day of a belt squat is honestly like pretty much dramatic change. I mean,
Yeah,
dramatic in the sense of like it's a third day of squatting, and it's specific to her legs. So that's
right.
above and beyond what we've done for the squat. And then, from a pulling standpoint, we have one day from the floor and one day from blocks, and she's always been able to tolerate that really well. And the blocks are always slightly heavier, and we'll do that like on a squat bench deadlift day to get more frequency in. And then bench, honestly, her technique was pretty off, like consistently for a long time. Like she just kicked, she kicked the bar forward. And I forget who it was. It might have actually been you mentioning, Spoto press as being like good for the bar path and just like
Uh-huh.
tightening things up. And she's been doing that really consistently. And her bar path on the bench hasn't looked this good like ever.
Oh,
Touches, good line of push, good arch, and then we'll do that Larson press and then like a competition grip day, and that's been working really well. So kind of to your point, it's like you don't want to scrap things entirely, but if you have like you've worked with Suzette for a really long time, you have some sort of history, you can say, and that's like a big thing. I think sometimes I under appreciate with coaching. It's like if you have a detailed, long history, you can say like these are meaningful changes, even though they look small. And sometimes I think because you'll hear this with coaches will say it in passing. It's like, oh, you get a new athlete, they get better because they're doing something different. It's like I don't know if that's always the case. Sometimes it takes like a good few months to get a grip on like what they need or what's going to work well. Kind of work out those technical kinks that sometimes can be pretty ingrained. So
uh-huh.
I think from a powerlifting standpoint, when we talk about like what adjustments would you make if things are kind of going backwards, you mentioned adding in like a KPI, like a single, making some minor adjustment like and a belt squat on a third day, some just like adjustment that's gonna try and add kindling to the fire. What about from a weightlifting standpoint where you kind of hit this intersection of technique, movement speed, and then maximal strength?
Yeah, I mean, very similar process, right? Similar kind of thing where I would say like the most important thing is to really look at like, are we overdoing it or underdoing it on the training volume? And in weightlifting, I almost think it's even more sensitive to it because it's like
Yeah.
you can just be sitting there grinding away, like just hacking away at lifts over and over and over again. And it's not that tiring. Like you could do it regularly, but it's just unproductive. It's
Yep.
not getting you any further forward. It's not doing anything like that. The strength work is very similar. Look at the difficulty of the work. If you're moving the bar at the right speed and it's like you can see the athlete is, sort of energetically producing force, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah,
Like they
yeah.
move the squats well with a lot of power
Good props.
versus, yeah, versus like grinding through them. It's like you know that that's not the kind of squatting that's going to produce good results.
Yeah.
Like it's just not going to transfer what you want. You're not developing the qualities you need. So yeah, like squatting looks the same as other strength work as far as diagnosing it. The Olympic lifts, I would say, way more like it's almost always like one of two things. It's psychological in that like those weights become challenging and they start to change things and screw up their technique, or it's that you're not getting exposure to the right intensities often enough, or yeah, I mean, you're not exposing yourself to the right intensities in the right, you know, systematic approach, and that could be too light, too heavy. When Andrea was here from Colombia, Andrea Zuluaga from Colombia, she talked a lot about how heavy we were training. We were training way
Mm,
too heavy, and she's like, "You're doing all these lifts like in America, everybody is doing like too much work to be strong." And you don't do enough volume in these lower intensity ranges. And I watched her program for people, and it was like a lot of complexes at like low intensity, 60 to 80% was most of her
wow.
volume. Yeah, and it was like everyone started looking really good that she was coaching. Like they started moving well, started lifting well. She also was a very attentive coach. She was like there, hands on. But the point being, like there was a lot of, yeah, there's a lot of like her really focusing on locking in and developing this sort of like volume of high quality, weights that were moving really well, you know? And so that I think really lent itself to like the right kind of training stimulus versus like training heavy all the time and like you're
Yeah,
touching heavy weights so it feels good, but you're not really getting any better. Your
yeah,
technique's not improving, you're not getting any stronger, you're not more powerful, you're just kind of like, you know, hacking away through it, Um, yeah. So I think that's the kind of like definite like potential issues there.
yeah.
Yeah. So I
What?
would, yeah.
Yeah. What do you You mentioned that when she would write programs, she would have like more complexes, lighter lift, 60, 80% was roughly where majority of the volume was. What with her coaching, in your gym and you being able to see that and like see the program, what did you pull away? Like, what'd you take from her that you've kind of added into the way you write
Well,
programs and you coach?
what I would say is it reminded me a lot of what I'd done in the past, which was when I had a lot more success, not more, when I was having a bunch of success with, like, you know, whatever, 6, 7 years ago with, when I was on Team JTS, like, I was really focused a lot more on what she was doing, which like way higher volume of training.
Yeah,
So like a lot more repetitions and a lot lower intensities. And like I was not doing as many complexes, but we are doing a lot of like triples in the no hook, no
yeah,
feet with like 70%, a lot of repetitions in the clean and jerk, 2+1, 3+1, 3+2, just like way more overall volume of
yeah,
the lifts themselves in lower intensity brackets. And I think it's really easy to move away from that to like that 85, 90% range and be like, oh, we'll do doubles and singles and like focus too much on that. So that's what I was doing. And I think that was a takeaway for me was like, I need to go back to this, finding the right distribution of intensity for people and applying that correctly. With the other takeaway from her though was like, it was very much a matter of she suggested this is something I hadn't done as much of, but she was like, you need to do more repetitions. Like, you need your sets to be like, you need like sets of like 4 and 5 in the snatch. And I was like, really? She's like, yeah, like you don't do any of these kind of workouts with higher volume. Like, um, and I was surprised by that. I was a little bit like, okay, um, you know, I guess we'll do that. But yeah, it was like a very like we need to be focused on these higher rep ranges that are quite a bit more conducive to technical development and practicing the skill of the lifts in a different capacity than just going heavy for singles doubles.
Yeah.
So that was like the two biggest things from her. And then also like she just did a lot of like drill work and focused on the technique and the drill and the, what exactly is moving one way or the other. Yeah.
Yeah, I've kind of shifted a little bit back to that as well. Having like more primers, like more movement primers, having more lifts dedicated to either overloading specific components of like the movement. So in the jerk, like a jerk dip or drop to split or some kind of like overhead, like a recovery or something. Adding in more dips if needed, just like constraining the shit out of it if we have to. It's
Yeah.
like if your dip is really, really bad, we're gonna do just as many tempo jerks,
Yeah.
slow down, pause in the bottom. We'll do that multiple times, do pauses, just like as much as possible to hammer out those errors. And I've kind of been shifting back to that because I think what ends up happening. It's funny you mentioned this in passing. You said, back when I used to have a lot of success, like, well, not when I only had a lot of success, but like when I also was successful, this is what I used to do. And then you kind of shift away from it for whatever reason, and then you kind of find your way. Like, okay, I realize that has some value, so I'll like start adding that stuff back in.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and one thing I mentioned before we started recording is sometimes how, surprisingly how much work needs to be dedicated to to movement quality to really push it forward. Yeah, especially when there's just like long-standing errors. Just like, okay, you kind of always bump the bar out. You kind of always cut your extension. You're kind of always unbalanced in the catch. So you should probably shuttle even like more resources, more movements to that. So I like that. I definitely picked up on that. Was there anything from a technique standpoint that she emphasized or tended to really to push or to reiterate over and over?
Not really. I didn't really feel like I pulled anything there like that was like, oh wow, you're doing this secret technique that no one knows about. It's pretty straightforward and set in stone. Like I feel like,
Yeah.
yeah. But it was like the thing that I could tell made her a good coach is just like she coaches a lot.
Yeah.
Like she's in the gym, coaches her athletes, and is focused on that to a large degree where it's like this lady is like really trying to, create like the perfect movement and really develop her athletes better. Where, I'm just trying to kind of coast on my success and my fame. And I just largely try to ignore a lot of what's going on and just hope that no one quits. And then when they don't acknowledge my fame, I usually get upset with them and I like reprimand them for not acknowledging that. But yeah, I mean, other than that, I think we're pretty much the same. No,
Uh,
it's very much just very
yeah.
attentive. Like you can
Yeah.
tell when a coach is good and they're just focused. She was just like dead set on everybody and like, it has to be this way, this way, this way, and like really into the movement. But at the same time, like people were doing like a workout would be like muscle snatch plus, snatch balance plus overhead squat. And then immediately after that, it was like power snatch plus hang snatch from above the knee. And then the next thing would be like another snatch complex, like snatch plus, snatch pull plus snatch. Like three pretty big
Yeah.
complexes in one session for just like snatch, which, like isn't by any means isn't wrong. But it was definitely like, that's a lot more than I would expect, you know? But again, like that's how you get to those, that's the only way you're going to get to like meaningful volume at those at those intensities, right? She's training at like 60 to 70% and probably accumulating 30 reps, 40 reps in a workout.
Mm.
So yeah, it's like this is different, you have to do it that way if you're going to get that kind of training volume in, which
Well,
is
I mean, like
yeah,
movement must be so sharp when you're
yeah,
doing that too, because you're just layering on the emphasis, like this emphasis of
yeah,
pulling the bar correctly, this emphasis of
yes,
receiving it correctly, and you
yeah,
just drill and drill and drill and drill, and like the entire workout's almost solely dedicated to movement quality.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's like a lot of that is just very much like it's finding the right movement, the right combo of movements to like sort of address one particular issue, and then just hammering on that. And that's like the beauty of a complex, right? Is you can say, hey, you have this one problem, which is like you don't finish your pull, so we're going to pick 4 or 5 exercises that really directly impact that, but no one of them is particularly amazing, or like it's like they're all kind of similar,
Mm.
but you get this exposure to that one problem many times in a single workout or a single session, where it's like 3 or 4 different elements in a complex all sort of lend themselves to addressing that from a slightly different angle. It's like a snatch, like a muscle snatch, or like a snatch pull, snatch high pull plus muscle snatch plus power snatch, like 3 or 4 different elements that all kind of address that, but in a different way, right?
Mm.
And you have a little bit different input to it. So I can see the value of doing that kind of thing. Whereas like if you just did a complex that's like, we've talked about this many times, like, uh, you know, 5 different things, none of them addressing a single focus. It's just work capacity you're building,
Yeah, yeah.
right? You're just building this ability to do a bunch of work, but it's not really, it's not really like a directed kind of adaptation for that particular error, you know?
Well, and you talked about how much work you'd have to accumulate to make it like meaningful work within that kind of intensity zone. And when you think about, it's always helpful to put this stuff in a perspective. If you say like, oh, I'm running, if you think about it like literally. If you say, okay, I'm running like a squat program, I'm running like a squat emphasis program or whatever you pick, whatever adaptation. And it's like, well, you only squat twice a week and you actually only do like, you know, 5 hard doubles after a couple of warm ups. It's like, okay, you're doing 10 reps of squatting. It's like, I doubt that's going to drive.
Yeah.
It's probably less likely to drive meaningful change. So if with weightlifting stuff, using this example, and I'm curious to hear about how you would sequence this after, but it's like, okay, we're going to work on your pull after contact. So we're going to do a no feet high pull plus a hang snatch. It's like if you do 5 reps in a workout, 10 reps, it's like, are you really doing that much to change technique? But
Yeah.
if you say we're going to do a high pull muscle snatch, snatch balance, and then a high pull power snatch, hang snatch above the knee, and then we're going to shift into just doing hang snatches, like you probably got 30 reps and the literal emphasis is pulling the bar up and then
Yeah.
finishing with the legs. So
Yeah.
I think that's triple the work. It's probably going to have a better effect. It's lighter, so it's going to be higher quality. And people aren't going to be beat to shit. So I think maybe it takes some rethinking of, are we really targeting a weakness? Or are
Yeah.
we just like playing at it? And I've
Yeah.
played at it before. I'm not trying to say like I'm innocent of this, but I think that's like a good point to kind of hammer home, is like how much work is enough work to drive this change.
I feel like that's a question that's hard to answer, but I feel like I gravitate more and more towards like, if you want to fix something, you have to essentially saturate the program with that directive. Like, you can't think, like you just said, you can't think that like 4 doubles in the power snatch once or twice a week is going to like
Yeah.
make you finish your pull better. It will, but like not that much, where like
Yeah.
all of the times you snatch should be dedicated to that. Because one, if you're going to make a mistake, make it, the saying we have a lot of times, like, you should fail faster. Like,
Yeah.
be wrong as quickly as you can be wrong so you can get to the next thing that is closer to the right answer. And so if you're just doing a little bit, it's like you're saying, you're just playing at it. You're not really getting to the heart of the issue, and you're not really doing enough to move the needle. It's just too easy to like, oh, well, we throw in some power position snatches to help you get under the bar faster. It's like once on Tuesday for like 4 reps. It's fine. And you're just like, okay, like this is not enough, right? If you're going to do it and it's meaningful, you should be able to do it a lot and have the whole program saturated with that kind of
Yeah.
work. Yeah.
Well, you made this point. You made this point before. It's one of the only good points you've ever made, which is, sometimes you'll pick exercises like a pause snatch, at the knee, and that's going to correct positioning, and it might have this like negative effect of maybe the tempo or the cadence of the pull is like kind of skewed a little bit, but the trade-off is you're able to hold the correct position at the knee. So it's like it's
Yeah.
not meant to be the best exercise. It's meant to fix your biggest problem. Um, so I think it's kind of to that point. It's like, don't play it with like very few exercises or volume allocated to it, but also don't be afraid to like have that trade-off of, if we do a bunch of work from, you just have this huge smile on your face. I'm just
What
waiting
I'm
for it.
I'm just listening to you explain it.
But something like, okay, if, say you don't finish your pull entirely, like
Uh-huh.
you don't use your legs well at the top.
Right.
So, okay, we're going to add in a bunch of work with, power variations or hang variations. It's like, well, maybe we get less exposure to, being more stable in the catch. It's like, no, that's not really the purpose. And if you're a little back and forth, it's like, that's fine. The
Yeah.
trade-off of having that on the back burner is perfectly acceptable for trying to have a better,
Yeah.
like, extension or pull of the arms.
Yeah, and I think like it's easy to, well, one to one thing, like a lot of guys don't finish properly, and that's it's normal, it happens, Josh. But I think the other thing is like in a lot of cases, it's easy to think that you have to like, if we don't do this classic list, we're gonna totally lose the technique,
Yeah.
and it's like no, like all of these things are so similar. I think we
Yeah.
lose sight of the fact that how closely related like uh, hang power snatch is to a snatch. It's not
Yeah.
that far away, right? It's not like we're talking about, so I think specificity is something that is, if you look at it in the context of weightlifting, it's like we already know the best exercise. It's not like a
Yeah.
mystery anymore. Like this has been well researched. Like there's not some new movement, right? Sans the panda pull, which is the revolutionary thing that's fixed everybody's lifting. But it's like you look at something like track and field or like say American football, like there's a variety of things that could be done that it's hard to be completely like it's hard to grasp specificity there. No weight room exercise, nothing with a barbell has a high specificity, high, correlation to your results in football. It's all general, right? It's going to make you stronger and that has a general effect as far as like its contribution to your success as a football player, but specificity there or high specificity things are going to be like 4 to 10 second bouts of high intensity kind of like whatever sprint work or whatever you're doing, whatever position you play. So it's easy to look at specificity there and be like, specificity is something we have to really think about a lot to make sure we get right on target. We're looking more at the idea of like what is the right application of like what is the right technical execution of an exercise to reinforce somebody's skill or correct a deficient skill or deficient weakness in the lift. But like we know the barrage of exercises. It's like there's 150 200 movements that are like really worthwhile, maybe 400 or 500 with like all the tiny variations, but it's not something that's like, yeah, like, oh shit, or should we be doing snatches or some kind of snatch to help the snatch? Like, yeah, we know where they're going to be. So yeah, I think that's one of those things where it's like it's easy to get caught up in this idea that like, if I do this thing and it's not enough snatching, classic snatch, I'm going to really screw that up. It's like the reason I think people stop snatching or clean jerking and go down this route of other exercises or different variations and end up worse in the end is that it's probably more a dose of training. They
Yeah.
remove all the heavy training from their program and they don't replace it with variations that can match that level of intensity. You're going to struggle if your best no hook no feet snatch is like 75%, right? If you got little baby hands or something, like you can't hold the bar, like yeah, if that's all you do, then your average weight has just gone down so much that like that weight's going to feel so heavy when you do a regular snatch with 20% more than that. Whereas if you need to replace that with something or at least maintain some results in the snatch and clean and jerk. So yeah, I think it's a careful balancing act, and obviously that's what like periodization is for, is so we can actually like correctly do this. So we're not sitting there like, hey, it's 25 weeks out from the competition. Like we don't need to max our snatch and clean and jerk every week. We should
Yeah.
be doing a huge volume of corrective exercises. Obviously, trying to maintain as much strength as we can, but if we really have issues to work on, we have to work on them.
Well, and to that point, I think this is where experience comes in. So I mentioned Leah. It's like hit a pretty massive like 5% improvement in her squat, and it's like as soon as that happened, it's like her snatch had more pop, her
Yeah.
clean is better, like her recovery from the bottom's better. And prior to that, she actually hit 2 kilo PR from the block
Wow.
snatch 78, and then we transitioned to the floor, and she's like, "Why does 62 feel heavy?" From the
Yeah.
floor, and it was like pretty ragged, and it was kind of a slow like. Now 64 is kind of heavy, 65 is kind of heavy, 67 is like really sloppy, and then she just snatched 71, and I could tell the pop was there, like it was back. She's a few
Nice.
weeks out, and a lot of that is like, okay, if your training isn't specific and you're not developing any quality, you're gonna meet the you're gonna have a bad time basically when you start to incorporate full
Yeah.
lift. Like because you're not stronger, you don't have better like you don't say like RFD, but like you're not
Yeah.
quicker, you don't have more pop, your technique's not better. It's like so you're kind of just spinning your wheels. So when you do reintroduce classic snatching or classic clean and jerks, if something is stronger or your technique's better, it's like just give it time, and that time's gonna let it take hold. And I think that's the idea of like maybe you just have more drawn out blocks. Maybe you're not trying to just shove things into like 3 weeks or a few weeks, because for example, legs are stronger, pull stronger, whatever it is, technique's better. That's going to come around. You're not gonna be worse because you're hitting PRs in close variations or strength lifts. I mean,
Yeah.
that's unrealistic.
Yeah. Totally. And a lot of people, unlike you, they don't need to be told to not shove things where they don't belong. But in a lot of cases, it's like so easy to think that you can just add stuff into the program on a regular basis. Just like we're doing 4 days a week, let's just throw in 2 more exercises or throw in some other stuff. And you're gonna run into the same problem. You just have too much volume, and so much of it is just like junk at that point because it's beyond the point of being, something that benefits you.
I was just so much going through my head about having too much volume. Um,
Yeah.
but one thing I did want to ask, if you when you do sets of four, right? Because I think that's something that I'll probably end up trying. And I've programmed that before, like
Well,
when you'd
sets of
read.
four is my idea. I
I know.
invented the idea of doing 4 reps. Everybody else was thing is like everybody else was doing 3 or 5,
Yeah.
and I was like, well, I'm gonna do 4, and it's my patented the 4 by 4 method.
This is the
Four
Montana
sets of
method.
4. Yes, it's the Montana method. It's a lot like the Texas method. I invented doing repetitions. Most people used to just do the sets,
Yeah.
and I was like, let's do the reps also. So I made this new thing up called reps.
Yeah, the good old 4x4.
Yeah,
But when you do set, say you add in a high rep set with snatch, I think
yeah,
the easy problem to run into is like, okay, we do some sort of like sets of 5 from the blocks, we do sets of 5 from the hang, 4, whatever it is. We do high volume work, lower intensities, and then people sequence that and they're like, it's kind of flat at the end. So when you program that way, um, are you thinking like there could be a day where we're doing sets of 4 in like a competition prep block just to maintain some of that same
yeah.
stimulus. Yeah.
I would. Yeah, I think that's one of those things that's really overblown. This whole again, it's like one of those specificity things where it's like it's not the main driving mechanism of results, but like there's nothing wrong with say someone doing multiple or higher rep sets of snatches
Yeah.
in close to competition. Um, I would say if it's like it occupies a huge amount of resources, it's not. But like I mean, I've just seen. Imagine this: like there was a line in one of the books, one of these Soviet texts that was translated, and it was something along the lines of athletes. They noticed that athletes achieve their highest results of all in training during the most difficult training,
Mm,
and it was something to that effect, right? And it's like you're reading it kind of like, okay, yeah, sure, that makes sense. Then you really think about it and you're like, oh yeah, like these guys were hitting like personal records or like humongous weights in the most difficult training. So they're doing the most training they were doing in the entire training cycle, like the heaviest weights, probably the largest volume. Like this is the time when they were you know, most fatigued. Maybe not on that particular day, but like this is when this huge
yeah.
training stimulus versus being in a competition where you're going to be in the potentially the best shape to express that skill and that strength, but not necessarily as physically strong as you were when you were a little bit overweight in the training cycle and
Yeah.
you were like, you know, doing like this enormous amounts of training. Granted, drugs played a role in that in those systems, but like I think the principle is still the same. Is like getting back to the fours, like I don't think that particularly the amount of volume you're doing is going to have, all things being equal, going to have this massive detrimental impact. Obviously, it will if it's not timed right and your fatigue management is in place. Like doing huge training volumes on
Yeah.
Monday is going to make Wednesday worse. But all things being equal, like I hit probably my best list when I was training the hardest I was, in practice. I wasn't, granted, there was probably a few misses and it wasn't like I was in the best shape to compete, but I was hitting bigger weights there, right? So I do think there's no need to be super concerned with doing some higher rep sets close to competition or even, those last couple weeks in.
Yeah, and I think to your point earlier on the podcast about the average weight on the bar going up, if you can find ways of like accommodating that, which is something I've been using a lot recently. I don't know why I started thinking about it again, but I've been using clusters more often,
Yeah,
which is let's do doubles or triples. We want to drive the intensity up, but I want to make sure they're high quality. So let's go 30 to 45 seconds rest between reps. Maybe closer to competition, it's like 45 to 60
yeah,
seconds. And we'll do, I had someone lift today. She's competing in a few weeks. She's doing like mid to high 80% doubles is like clusters. And it's like around 5 sets from like 80 to 90%. And they look probably as sharp as they have.
that's
So
really good. Yeah,
I've yeah, and I've been honestly using that a lot now, especially with the classic lifts. Um, which is, hey, we need a certain amount of work to get better, and if we can break that up just a little bit so the quality is maintained. And I think part of this stemmed from the fact that I had a lifter. She had hit doubles, and the second rep was like really trashy. And she's like, I can't dial the second one. And it's like, all right, well, I'm not gonna have you just like beat your head against the wall. We'll just like extend the rest, make it kind of like a new, like fresh lift, and the quality's there, and then we can kind of build on that. And I've been kind of playing around with that like throughout training blocks of going from sets of three, maybe doing sets of doubles, maybe even early on doing sets of four. Um,
yeah,
I like that. I like that.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I find that when I feel like there's a balance in this program where it's like you want a good exposure to,
Someone's gonna
it's like,
screenshot you doing this and make a
yeah,
meme out of it. By the way.
yeah, the Illuminati. The I'm in it. I'm in it. By the way, if I was in the Illuminati, I'd be telling everybody. That'd be the coolest thing I've ever done. I'd be kicked out pretty quick, I'm guessing. But no, the thing is, like, I think a lot, there's this sort of bullseye of like, are you targeting a lot of things well with the right application of like, hey, we got enough volume, we have a good distribution of the intensity zones, and we're addressing the technical problems from as many angles as we can that are sensible, versus a program that becomes like so narrow in its scope that it's just like
Yeah.
everything's heavy-ish,
Yep.
everything's too slow-ish, everything's a little bit too like, it's just too much to one side. It's too isolated where it's like, well, that's lifting. Like you go heavy all the time, and like I think that's a really common mistake people make is they don't get this broad exposure to a variety of intensities, a distribution of training that kind of spans across the most important ranges without losing sight of we still need to go heavy.
Well, it's kind of funny you mentioned that. I was talking to Leah, and she's like, "Something's wrong with with my snatch. The weights feel really off." And I was like, "Well, we just need. I think we actually just need lighter sessions because I think you're doing
Yeah.
like 80 to 90% sessions like 3 days a week. So like, let's back one of those down." She's like, "Well, I'm good with light weights." It's like, well, it's not about light weights. It's about like that. It's about bar speed, really,
Yeah.
and it's just about having high quality work that serves to like bridge those heavy sessions. And a lot of that's like, okay, well, I'll constrain it a little bit more to make it have more of a technical emphasis. So maybe we'll do like, if we're just doing pure power snatches, like, okay, maybe we'll do like no feet power snatch or power snatch plus hang power snatch. We'll make it a little more targeted, but keep bar speed up, keep the weight down. And you actually, we've talked about this a couple of times, and you mentioned like, yeah, throw in a no hook, no feet day, 70 to 75% for doubles and triples. And that's going to peel back that intensity, keep the effort high, but allow the bar speed and technique to be there. And whenever I get in a rut of like, yeah, I think things are just kind of getting a little too heavy because it feels logical. It's like, okay, go heavy on day one, day three, day five. It's like, well, we don't have another day where we're just kind of going like light to moderate. So we'll peel one of those back, or I'll increase frequency and add in just like a light exposure, some like really easy power snatch or like a muscle snatch or something. Um, and that's been really
Yeah.
helping quite a bit. So I think, I was thinking before this podcast, I would title it, as clickbaity as possible, like the secrets to, weightlifting programming or something. And I thought we covered good ground on how to help
Yeah.
people improve who are kind of like stuck in a rut or aren't training well and seeing like
Yeah.
adequate results from training hard.
Yeah. And again, like the biggest takeaway for me in the last 10 years is just like the monitoring the training process with the right perspective is the most important thing, right? Like the training load is easy to add or subtract from, but like you have to justify your decisions against performance versus just what makes sense in your head. Like, oh, we go up this much or we go down this much or whatever. Like just, apply the training load to the athlete's response.
Yeah. And one thing I want to mention before we end the podcast, because I know you have to go coach in like 20 minutes or so. The Power and Strength Summit
Yeah.
is a online speaking event hosted by yours truly. And that is August 2nd and 3rd. We're going to have a stellar lineup of speakers, which includes Mike Young, Jesse Stimo, Zach Caswell, Zach Bartell, who you know fondly.
Yes.
Um, and then we're going to have Peter Giacobbe, who's an expert in guided imagery and visualization. He's like sports psych.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, he's big in the sports psych realm. He's done a ton of work in that space. And then Jake Rimmer, who is almost
Oh,
completed
nice.
his I think he's finished data collection, so he's probably close to defending and becoming a PhD. One of the craziest hypertrophy studies probably ever done. They just finished wrapping up, so I'm really excited to read that and learn
That's
more
cool.
about it. Yeah, and Chris Tabor, yours truly. So
Oh,
we're gonna
nice.
yeah, so we're thinking. So the way I structure this is we have a session dedicated to kind of like running a big, successful team in weightlifting, with Jesse being the CEO of Power and Grace, and
Nice.
then we start with the like qualities. So Chris is or Jake's gonna talk about hypertrophy. Eventually, Tim Sukamel is going to talk about maximal strength and strength development, so how to assess it, how to develop it. Chris will talk about power training. Mike Young's going to talk about plyometrics. Zach Caswell is going to talk about bridging, weightlifting, and S&C, and then Zach Bartell is going to talk about how to kind of bring all of this together, take that expertise, and turn it into a successful business. Um,
That's cool.
so you can put food on your plate. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a great event. I invited you to speak at the round table, so I hope you're able to make that and
No.
contribute. Um, and if people are interested in signing up, you can use any of the speakers. They have a code. It's their first name, last name, no spaces. Put that in at checkout, and they'll get a kickback from that. So if you go to powerandstrengthsummit.com and you buy a ticket to attend, yeah, insert one of the speakers' names.
How much is it?
If I don't remember exactly, but I want to say it's around like 120 or 130.
That's it.
That's it.
That's an extraordinary deal. Anyone who has not signed up is a lunatic.
Yeah.
That's an incredible lineup for that much money. I'm
Yeah.
dead serious. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
No, it's a
really
ton of value.
impressive.
Yeah.
I would expect to pay closer to like $500 for a seminar like that. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah,
really looking
killer
forward
deal.
to it.
Killer deal.
And the one thing I can't wait is I want to know more about plyometrics and power training and
Yeah.
strength development, hypertrophy. I had Jake Rimmer on
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
podcast recently, and he talked about some work they did. They looked through I think they did some sort of like review of the literature. And they were basically looking at training volume and hypertrophy, and it was like detailed to how many sets and how many reps. And we
Oh,
recorded a
that's cool.
podcast and discussed
That's
that.
really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to get that. Very nice. Sweet,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
I'm
And
excited.
yeah, I'm excited
Yeah.
too. So people should go sign up. I'll have everything linked in the description. That's something I worked on. I put a ton of time in earlier this summer.
Yeah.
Shift gears a little bit more because I'm more like school focused and actually focused on writing programs. What do you have going on? I know CoachLogik it's made its way to a mobile app,
Yeah, we
and
have a
it's completely like redressed. And my experience of it has done like a 180.
Yeah, we have. So we got the mobile app out. It's still like we're still working on some. This week we have a ton of backlog patches, updates, and stuff to go out. There's still like a UI refresh that's been in progress. So the whole calendar page will be changed. You can modify and edit programming right from there. Things are getting simplified, and then we have a bunch of AI program generation stuff that'll be in the app. Hopefully this week, if not, by the end of this week, which is really cool. The stuff we've seen with it's really neat. So you'll be able to like take a spreadsheet program and just upload it into the app, and it'll just populate your whole calendar with it. So you can get templates out of old programs you have, and then you'll have some other cool features where you can like basically prompt it to build you a 10, 15, 20 week, whatever, 10-week weightlifting program or powerlifting program. And that's pretty exciting. And then the AI program stuff, we've worked on our own proprietary stuff, is coming around too, which is cool. So yeah, in the next month, we're going to have basically all the AI programming options available in the app for coaches and then for athletes as well, which would be really
Wow.
nice. Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah.
Just been
I
a
think
lot of work.
yeah, I feel like it was it around this time last year where
Yeah.
it kind of like beta released?
Yeah, it's we've been in this game of cat and mouse with like we've launched, we've pushed product out, like we're getting users, but it's always this game of like it's just a small team, like we just
Yeah.
need more developers, we need more capital to hire people. But, it's working. I mean, we want to make sure that we are able to grow with the product. We don't want to try to take on people too quickly and then end up in a spot where it's like, oh shit, like we can't hold on to these people. So we're like bringing them on, let them go. But now we're in a spot where we really, I feel like we've hit some good strides, good momentum with it, and I think we'll start to really get more people into it. Yeah, I'm excited. It's like the product gets better and better every week. This next round of updates that comes out over the next week or two will be really significant. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, like, people would think, is CoachLogik something that I should use as an athlete, as a coach to a small number of athletes, as someone who runs a gym, as someone who's like an S&C coach? And as I was thinking that question, the people who have reached out to me, just like asking about it,
Yeah.
have been people who are weightlifting coaches, people who are in the strength and conditioning sector, people who run online businesses, and people who are like in powerlifting. So, and I would recommend it to all of them. So it kind of makes sense to me. Like this is kind of for anyone who
Yeah.
does some form of coaching. It's a means of delivering, a product to an athlete or a client, in the most, it's like the most efficient and well-sourced way possible. I don't know if you would change that.
Yeah, I mean, it's also like a lot of it is like it's designed in a different way. Like our whole goal is this integration of AI tools. So it's not so much that like I mean, building just the basic platform was a bear of a project. But now that we have the basic foundation done, the AI stuff on top of it will be really, really cool. And like I think the biggest thing is a lot of times it's easy to have like a good example. Very, very well known coach coaching someone I know got their program 3 weeks out from the competition. They said, hey, why are we deloading 3 weeks out? It seems weird for a peaking block. And they were like, well, why didn't you tell me about the competition? It's like, well, I did. It's on the spreadsheet you sent me. It's been on
Mm,
there for 6 months or 6 weeks or whatever. And like, when you're doing this combination of WhatsApp and spreadsheets, like those are fine solutions if you have three people, but if you run a business, you take it seriously, like you have to have real tools.
yeah.
And there's just going to be this game of like what tools can we build and provide that are better than what's out there. And so that's what we're doing,
Yeah.
trying to do.
Yeah, and I think being able to see that as a coach of where could I improve? It's
Yeah.
not like oh well, I'm already doing it one way. It's like I'd rather do it a better way,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and you use the tools possible. It's so funny, like in academia, especially in classes that are like heavy on like coding or engineering. They're like, yeah, use AI tools to write scripts. It's like, I mean, whatever is gonna help. It's like
Dude,
it doesn't matter. It's like be able to use it effectively and
Yeah.
then get the job done correctly. It's like that's the purpose of it.
I think we're entering a really interesting space. I mean, to not turn this podcast into an AI discussion, but like you just said, it's like the fact that like, I mean, I built a landing page in like an afternoon, and not even
Uh-huh.
that. Like,
Yeah.
and like that's something that's like you just have to imagine there's this shift that's going to happen
Yeah.
where a lot of stuff, and to like to not give coaches the ability to leverage that seems like criminal, right? Like we should be at the forefront of that. We collect lots of data. We should be using data to write programming. I mean, we talk about all this stuff all the time, average weights or distribution or sequencing, or just like we model programming in our heads and then write it down and don't reassess the model or look at like all the data. Usually a lot of people are just doing it and they sort of wing it, like, oh, every week we go up 5%. So to me it's like we should be in that place of like really collecting huge amounts of
Yeah.
data as much as we can, giving coaches tools to analyze it and get something out of it and make better athletes and better coaches.
Well, you end up getting in, you end up going on this like AI thing. I would end up going on this like cognitive bias thing of,
Yeah,
we get used to what we do and then we see that as right, or we have this like subconscious or conscious bias of, well, this is the true right way, which is me doing everything by hand in Excel. And it's like, yeah, that's one way, and it's like a pure product. It's like you. Um, but as soon as you start using like AI tools, it's like, well, now it's a better product. And you just happen to use different software. It
yeah,
doesn't mean it's wrong. It just
yeah,
means it's different. I mean, if you sell it and you say like, I don't know, if you're like claim intellectual, ownership of it, like,
yeah,
hey, didn't really write it. That's
yeah,
one thing. But to say like, how does this program look? Could I improve it? And if it would have the
yeah.
means to do that, it's like, I think that's just being resourceful. And is it kind of gray at some points? Maybe, but I think if you're honest with yourself, you kind of know what you're doing and what you're not doing. So
Yeah,
for,
and
yeah, go ahead.
no, so, and like a lot of the stuff, like a lot of it you think about is like we're trying to develop tools, right? Not necessarily change the way you like. Tools are always going to be limited in what they can do, right? A wrench does one thing well. This just happens to be a tool that has many possible uses, and it can do much more complex things than just turn a bolt. So it's like ultimately though, it's like we want to build tools that give you insight that you couldn't get, that you could get, but you wouldn't get because it's too difficult, right? Like, are you going to look into your spreadsheet and really calculate all these different training variables when we could do the same thing for you? Like, and that's what software is great at, right? Is like being able to aggregate lots of data, draw out information from that data, and now we have this amazing ability to interface with it with just English versus needing to like build a query and say, okay, tell me the average tonnage of all these things, and then lets me like really analyze that. We can just ask it and get an interpretation of it.
Yeah.
um,
Well, I
Again,
think then
yeah,
I think then what's important, and I actually listened to a conversation last night. It was like, oddly, it was like about psychotherapy, but it was kind of examining this idea of being evidence based. It's like,
yeah,
what does it really mean to be evidence based? And I was thinking about that. It's like, or yeah, yeah, like especially in like a performance setting, it's like, well, you're not applying the literature like you're not applying research as it's written. Like you're not applying those programs. They're kind of like theoretical ideas. They're kind of tested with like, you know, triangulating research and saying like, well, this thing has kind of shown this and this thing's kind of shown that. Therefore, we can surmise. It's like, okay, what does it mean to be evidence based? Like, hey, you got a best guess of like what the research or data would say, and then you just like apply that in a way that makes sense based on experience and um, kind of what other people have told you or talked about or written about. And I think the underlying idea, like the most important thing, if you say I'm evidence based, it's like you have your most informed foot forward. With using the AI, it's like if I, for example, I'm like subscribed to CoachLogik and there's some AI tool to help write a program, it's like I'm not selling that then and saying, yeah, I wrote it.
yeah.
It's being informed of like what's the limitation of this tool, what can it do well, how can I best use it, and it's like, it's kind of an evidence informed coaching approach.
Yeah, yeah, and a lot of it too is like the tools we're going to provide are not so much like, oh, generate a program and then call it your own. The goal here is to be able to like say, here's what I want, here's the coaching style, the programming style I have, get me 80% of the way there and then let me edit it from there, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't realize, I mean, you could argue that if you do the Texas method and you write that into your program as your squat program, like, did you create that or did someone
Yeah.
else
Yeah.
create that?
Yep.
It's not about that. It's just about like giving people real tools to just make their lives easier so they can get closer to the thing they're trying to get to, which is, you know, delivering high quality training and coaching. And coaching is so much more than just writing the program, you know?
Well, and let me ask you a question. Would it be wrong if, someone pays you for remote coaching and you use some tool like that and you provide a product that objectively gets them better results? It's like, well, is that a problem if you would have written it from scratch and it would have been less effective? Is that like, well, it wasn't, it's like, so you get into those spaces where it's like, honestly, what you're trying to do is you're trying to provide people with a means to making the best progress they can make in their situation. Um, so I'm here for it. I think that's
Yeah.
awesome. And
Yeah.
I'm glad it's finally like on that part of the development process where it's not creating everything from scratch.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a long road. You've seen it obviously in every state it's been in. It gets better and better as we go. A lot of it is just, we just work through what we have. And, in a year, it's like, imagine where it'll be in a year, 2 years,
Yeah.
like, the fact that we built it in a way that I'm totally confident we'll be able to capitalize on every level of AI improvement that
Wow.
exists in the industry is the key, right? Because it's like, yeah, we might not be it might not be today, it might not be what we want it to be in 5 years, but in 3 years, it might be further ahead than we ever could
Yeah.
have imagined because who knows what exists, we have the sort of tailwind of probably the most money ever dumped into a single technology in the history of mankind, and will be for the next, probably decade plus. So it's like, yeah, we have that as a tailwind, and it's like it's pretty cool time to be able to do
Yeah.
stuff like this.
Yeah. That's awesome. I'm super
Yeah,
excited.
yeah,
If people want to check it out, obviously I'm going to link everything down below. I mean, I feel like that's a formality, but if people want to check it out, where can they go to sign
yeah.
up?
Just go to coachlogic.com with a K, and you can sign up there. And then there's a 2 week trial, so you get to try it for 2 weeks, see how it is. If you're interested, we'll do like migration, so we move all your programs or a bunch of your programs, all your clients over for you. So there's zero barrier to entry. You can just sign up and then set up a call with Zach, and he'll get you set up and migrate your people, migrate some of your programs, and then obviously once we get the AI stuff, you can migrate all of them. Yeah, give it a try.
Yeah, awesome. If people are interested in keeping up with me, it's obviously philosophical weightlifting on Instagram and everywhere else. All the relevant links will be down below. Thank you for listening to another episode of the podcast, and we will catch you all next week.